Welcome to the Crafting Character Podcast. Steve Carter here, and in association with my good friends at Preaching Today and Food for the Hungry, I bring you a podcast that hopefully helps you get better at the craft of teaching and preaching and communicating God's word while always hoping and ensuring that our character leads the way. Well, today I'm really excited because this is going to be a different kind of conversation. You know that I love the art of communication. And if we hung out, you know that I love all forms of communication. And one of the forms that has shaped and helped me as a storyteller and preacher has been stand-up comedy. And for a while, I've been trying to find a way to actually bring someone in who loves the scriptures, has a pastoral heart, but also understands the mechanics, the uniqueness that comedy can play on the stage, in a church, or just in regular conversations to actually help people engage with greater truths. And today we are going to talk with my friend Jelani Greenidge. He wrote a book, Undercover Prophets, pursuing stand-up comedy to talk about what matters most. He is a missional storyteller with the Evangelical Covenant Church. He is an author. He is someone that you're just gonna love. You're gonna love the guy's heart. You're gonna love just what he has to share. This guy loves the scriptures. And so, without further ado, Jelani, welcome to the Crafting Character Podcast.
Steve, what's up? Thanks for having me. Really excited to be here.
Man, well, dude, let's just jump right in. You had me at stand-up comedy, and just talk about that. A little bit of a backstory. Where did comedy first kind of capture your attention?
Well, I come from a large extended family of mostly loud and gregarious Black people who love to laugh. And so I think comedy was modeled for me very early on, obviously not in any explicit way, but just the freedom to laugh and to find joy in small moments and being together. That was a big part of my upbringing. And then I also, because we're a very musical family, I was used to being on stage. I had a background in singing gospel music. And then as I entered adulthood, really, as a child and as a teenager, I was doing a lot of hip hop ministry and kind of then integrated that into my worship ministry and my ministry as a pastor. But then what ended up happening was about 12 years ago now, a friend of mine he emailed me out of the blue, and he was like, "Hey, I'm doing this stand-up show, and I want you to come see me do 5 minutes." He started with, "I'm taking a stand-up class, and this is our graduation show, and I want you to come out and support me because I'm doing 5 minutes. And by the way, tickets are free." And the first thing I wrote back to him was, "Well, you could have had me at tickets are free." But I showed up, and he was good. He was funny. And I enjoyed what he did, but I'm also a really competitive person. And so I was thinking, I'm funnier than that dude. So I took this same class from the same guy and then did the same show, like several months later. And from that point on, it was just an incredible feeling. And I felt like I want to do more of this, because what I remember feeling the most was that it was similar to music, but also very, very different at the same time, because it was like I had a chance to kind of translate my worldview to people and help them to see the world as I saw it and get affirmation from that. And so it was like, this is dope. I like this. And then so I started trying to do it more. And then I realized pretty quickly that, doing stand-up is just like any other art or pursuit where it really helps to build a community as you're doing it. And the problem that I was running into is that there were not that many people that I knew who were believers in Christ, who were interested in pursuing this. And it was very difficult for me to build community with people that I didn't have a lot in common with.
Mm.
And so it kind of got to a point where it sort of fizzled out. I did a couple of shows here and there, and I did a couple of competitions, and I did an advance. And I talk about this in my book a little in greater detail. But the point is, I was kind of like, I want to do this. I guess this is the easiest way to say it is the vision or the idea never really died for me, because I knew that I saw comedy as a way of being able to distill the things that were most important to me and make them accessible to a broad audience. And as someone who's had a lifetime of church ministry, I'm like, more pastors need to learn how to do this, because this is what we're trained to do. This is what we're supposed to do, is to show people, this is my view of the world. This is who I believe God to be. This is who I believe we're supposed to be in the world. And I want to share that with you. And I was like, why don't more pastors learn how to do this? So my struggle in trying to learn how to do that kind of made me confront that question, and my inability to gain traction in terms of building community around comedy led me to write this book, in part to convince more Christian people to learn how to do it so we could do it together, because there's just a handful of people that I know who are doing it. And, I just felt like it was a underutilized tool in the tool belt of pastors.
Well, I think it's interesting, let me see if you resonate with this, but, I think one of the most vulnerable sports is wrestling. All right. So if the reason I say that is you are in the ring, the mat, and it's just you and another guy, right? Yeah. Like there's no bat.
Yeah, there's no equipment.
There's no equipment. It's just you have some tight spandex on. It is vulnerable, and it's literally like you're either going to get pinned or you're going to pin.
Right.
Like it's just that. When you think about preaching, like you can say, hey, and we see this. We see people who have natural ability who haven't figured out supernatural ability, right? They just have natural communication style, but they still have the equipment of the text. And hopefully that they're like teaching from the text. Well, stand up, almost like a cappella singing, where you get up there and you're like, it is just me and this way at which I tell a story. It's like I'm either going to get pinned by the crowd, Apollo, or I'm going to pin the crowd because they are dying laughing.
Right.
I think there's like a vulnerability in stand-up that I think what you are inviting people into to actually do that will make them a better communicator, because it requires, I have to trust an idea. I have to trust this story. You know what I mean? Like, and so how did you, as someone who, again, you grew up, like you are someone who's led worship, like you're a storyteller, but how did you like overcome that kind of vulnerability where it's just like you and a mic, and I'm going to live or die by the way that I tell this, or this vulnerability, or sell this concept?
That's a great question. I think it happened. Let me say it this way. There was not one thing that I did where I was like, that's how I conquered that. But it was more like an accumulation of factors.
Okay.
So, and a lot of the stuff I talk about in my book, I grew up Black in the Pacific Northwest. And, in the Pacific Northwest, the two main cities, Portland and Seattle, Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, there is a passionate, close-knit Black community, but we are not strong in number, let's just say.
Yeah.
So when as you grow into a professional, you get used to being one of a few or the only Black person in the room.
Yeah.
And so because of that, you don't really have a choice of whether or not you're going to stand out. You're going to stand out regardless. Even just saying hello, you're going to stand out. Like I remember actually when I was taking that class I was telling you about, and I showed up for the comedy class, and I was greeting a bunch of people, And then there was another dude that I knew who was black, and I kind of gave him the nod, and he gave me the nod. And then the guy who was teaching the class, he kind of noticed that, and he sort of asked me, like, not in an accusatory way, but he was like, what was that nod thing you guys do? And I was like, well, being black, in a white space like Portland, it's kind of like being in a secret club. When you meet somebody else who's in the same club, you kind of give them that look of recognition, like, oh, you're in the club too. And so he goes, the guy's teaching the class, he goes, oh, so it's, like owning a Harley or something, right? And I was like, yeah, if owning a Harley made it harder to get a job. And he laughed at that. But it was one of those things that I just said really quickly without thinking, because I'm just used to being someone who doesn't have a choice about whether or not I'm going to be noticed. So that was one big factor. The other big factor, I think, is that I grew to a point of learning about the Word of God and understanding the Word of God to a point where I just became passionate about wanting to share it with people because it was so incredible to me. And I want to be clear, when I go do stand up, I'm not doing primarily stand up about God's Word or about stuff in the Bible. But I do have a sense of urgency to want to share people nuggets of truth and nuggets of grace and honesty, and not put up a persona and act like everything's okay. Like, I really want to connect and show people that I'm a real dude. Matter of fact, this is one of the jokes that I do on stage, is I tell people, one of the reasons, like, if I tell people on stage that I've worked as a pastor or I was working at the pastor at the time, I'll say, one of the reasons why I like to do comedy as a pastor is to show that, pastors and preachers are just regular people. Like, even one of the most famous preachers, in America, was Dr. King. And we think of Dr. King as a saintly human being, but he was just a regular dude. He had moments, he had bad days like everybody else. There were times when, he's stuck in traffic too, and sitting in front of a red light, and then the light turns green, and he's like, green at last, green at last. So, I mean, it's a silly joke, right? But that urgency, that desire to tell people, like I'm a real person.
Yeah.
It's part of what propelled me to want to get up on stage and talk to people about my life. And, go ahead.
I love that because, I think that's what makes, there's such a connection when you feel that. But I do love, though, and you've talked about this before, is that love for the text. You actually started to see, like, the humor, the uniqueness of the story. Like, when you actually begin to see, yes, it's truth, but that the storytelling in that, there's a ton of humor in the text, and I think most preachers miss it.
No, yeah, because we go too quickly to, this is the application for you in your life.
Yeah.
And not that that's not important. It is important. There should be application. We should read the Bible, not just as literature or stories, but to receive something. However, I think if we don't take time and really try to discover who Jesus is in a storytelling sense, to get into the details and imagine it for ourselves. That's actually one of the reasons why I love that series, The Chosen, because when you watch The Chosen, you're not just reading these like Bible stories, but they're like really trying to bring it to life. And so and even before I saw that show, there would be biblical scenes that I would imagine and going, man, that's really funny. Like okay, in John, I think chapter 11, where Jesus hears word that Lazarus has died, has passed away. And Jesus says to his disciples something like, you know what? He's just asleep, and let's go so I can wake him up. And they were like, if he's asleep, he'll just wake up on his own. And then Jesus is like, okay, you guys aren't getting it. He's dead, but I'm gonna go see him, and he's gonna come back, And Thomas's response was, well, I guess we're all just going to go with you so we can die as well. Now, Like the text doesn't say this, but I feel like Jesus, after hearing that, is like, Thomas, if you don't want to go, just say you don't want to go.
Yeah.
You're like, do you not have any faith at all? Like, not only do you not believe that I can bring him up, but you somehow believe that if you come with me, all of you are going to die. Now, in fairness to Thomas, they had just been threatened by stoning and all that. So Thomas wasn't making all this stuff up. Like, they had legit reason to fear. But it's still a really funny moment that Jesus is like, come with me, we're going to save this man's life. And the disciples' first response is, okay, well, I guess we're all going to die in the process.
Yes.
So there's just all these funny moments like that I think are so great and worth really digging into.
Yeah. Jelani, talk about that though, because I think some of the ways that people communicate from the text is sometimes they miss the homiletical beat, the kind of like what's actually going on. So they just read it like they're reading the words of the text, whether in, John 11, it's like very monotone, but they're missing like the urgency or the energy in a story.
Yes.
Talk about kind of in comedy or just in, as a storyteller, in storytelling, the dynamics of tone. Why is that so important? And then how is when you're like getting ready to like read a text or, share with someone like you just did, are there ways at which you really kind of, any tips to help kind of preachers? Because we got pastors listening in their 60s who are incredible, but are longing to get better. And we got emerging voices. Like, are there ways at which you've been like, hey, here's what I do. I stop. I did, like how to get to the heartbeat, the humor, the soul of the text when you read it.
Probably the number one thing that I do, when I'm trying to really get into a text, is I think about, what would this feel like? Like, if I was there, if Jesus had said that to me, or if I, had observed this firsthand, what would the vibe in the room be like? Like, how would other people perceive what is happening? I want to get at that. And the truth is, sometimes we just don't know. Like, the Bible is not written primarily as like this, document of forensic details that we can extrapolate. Sometimes there's huge chunks of it that are missing, or there's something that's said, that's written, and the author, because he's writing to a specific audience at a specific time, is kind of assuming that they know certain things, and we, as 21st century Americans or citizens of other nations, like, we don't necessarily have all of that. And so I think it takes time. First, you do need to understand more of the context, and you do need to have some historical understanding and some and even just some basic, like one of the things I just say in general is, anytime I'm preaching a text, and I know I don't just read the chapter. Like, if it's a small set of verses, at first I read the whole chapter. But if I can, even if I don't have time to like really deep into it, I'll do at least a quick dive of the chapter before and the chapter after, because I want to get a sense of, where is this moment in the character's overall arc.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've come to, I love television and movies, and I think those of us who really enjoy a really good story, dramatic story or whatever, you get a sense of how a character changes over time. And so then it's important to identify in the text, where is this person at their journey? And then how are these words hitting them in this space?
Yeah.
And then that kind of helps to fill in a lot of the stories. And then it helps you to then answer the question of, well, then how did they feel? How did they feel when Jesus said this? Were they offended? Were they excited? Did they feel ashamed? Maybe all of those things, you know what I mean? And so then kind of getting into those feelings is sort of what helps to drive the preaching. And the thing is, I also think it helps to drive good comedy, because that's another thing that I realized is, there's a lot of cleverness and a lot of like turns of phrase and kind of, a little bit of surprise that goes into crafting good jokes. But ultimately, in order for the stand-up to really hit, for people to really love it, you've got to put some of yourself into it. You've got to put some emotion into it. You've got to let the people know, this is what I'm feeling like. This is why I'm so upset about this. Or this is why I irrationally love this. And people think it's weird and I don't care because it's awesome. So I think that's, it's really kind of emotional intelligence, really. It is developing that self-awareness and that willingness to share a larger breadth of emotion and be able to translate that to what's on the page and what's in your sermon or what's in your stand-up.
Okay, let's play with this for a moment, because I'm sitting here thinking, all right, this is good, because I think this is really, really important. And I love playing it out. I love just kind of, so let's play with the verse together. I haven't told you this verse. This is just let's get in it.
Let's do it.
Like John 20, we'll stick in the book of John, because John 20, and I'll read 4 verses. Okay. Starting verse 19, it's John 20, it says, on the evening of that first day of the week, when the disciples were together with the doors locked for fear of the Jewish leaders, Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. After he said this, he showed them his hands and side. The disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Lord. Again, Jesus said, peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, I am sending you. And with that, he breathed on them and said, receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive anyone's sins, their sins are forgiven. If you do not forgive them, they are not forgiven. Like the most, like, just like in the sense where I'm like, okay, put yourself in that moment. You're in some room, doors locked.
Yeah.
Scared.
Right.
And then he appears.
My very first thought hearing that text with this mindset is, this is why we need multiple translations and multiple paraphrases. Because I feel like the phrase peace be with you is not adequate to describe the intensity of the moment. Yeah. I feel like Jesus was like, calm down, everybody.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It said the doors were locked. They were in fear for their lives. And not only does this guy show up who's supposed to be dead, but he shows up it doesn't say Jesus picked the lock. It doesn't say like he had been hiding the whole time and then sprang out of a cake or something. Like he just shows up. Like, who does that? Nobody does that. So for me, that's kind of the first thing is like, I would be crawling out of my skin. Like, who is this dude? And then it's like, to go from that feeling to like, oh, wait, I know this dude. I've seen this dude. Oh, wait, this is Jesus. Like, to me, it also recalls the moment. I think there's also an element of like embarrassment to it, of like, wow, we were freaking out. Like, we thought maybe you were coming to kill us. And now we realize you're this person that we should have known, all along. This is what I was going to say, is it recalls the story about Jesus walking with the folks on the road to Emmaus. Exactly. And they're telling him all this stuff and he's breaking it down and he's like, and they're still like, who are you again?
Yeah. Well, and you have that moment where it's like, he's, to your point, not adequate. Peace be with you. He says it again.
Right.
And then just imagine he like walks up on you and he's like, resurrection breath, just like breathes on you.
Right.
And like, just
right.
Like, wait, I'm freaking out. And now he's really close and he's just like, and again, there's context, brings you back to Genesis, where God's shaping and forming a human being. Now it's like, he's saying, hey, you're a spiritual being. I get all that. But then there's like what is going through the mind of these high school age disciples? And then it like ends like with common sense. It's like, hey, just know, if you forgive someone, they're forgiven. If you don't, they're not forgiven.
Yeah. Right. There's so much there. There's so much there. Like, for me, I'm wondering, what did Jesus' breath smell like? Like, were they like, okay, Jesus, I'm sort of with you, but are those raspberries? Is that what, and you say it's common sense, but it's like, I also wonder how both of those phrases were taken. Like, if you forgive someone, they will be forgiven. If you don't forgive them, they will not be forgiven. And, my instinct is there had to be at least one of the disciples going, so you're saying we have a choice? And he had to be like, no, I'm not saying that.
Yes.
Like, were you paying attention at all? Do you remember that 70 times 7 thing? No, you don't have a choice. So, yeah.
No, but see, this is really, really good because, like, for me, sometimes I'll just like sit in my office and I'll just try and play it out. I'll try and feel it out. Sometimes I'll even call, my best friend Tommy. And I'm like, all right, hey Tommy, how do you hear this story? Like, how do you interpret? How do you feel this story? Like, and we'll just start like just seeing the humor in it, and just like it almost like writes itself sometimes.
Right.
And you just can kind of feel and go, gosh, I wonder. And sometimes it's in the middle of a talk. You're like, I wonder if like Peter, because Peter would always say something random. Like, what would he have said at this moment? What would he, it just, I think in a way humanizes a moment.
Absolutely.
And connects. But here's what I love about your writing and the way that you use humor and the way that you really approach, it's like an ethos of value with the text, is you want to talk about really conversations that are not being talked about, matters that like really, really need to be more front and center in the church and in like the purview of the congregation. And you found that the comedy is a way to actually do that in a disarming way that allows people to engage. Talk about that. And maybe even just like, are there certain themes that you're like, man, this is how I've used comedy to really talk about blank?
Well, I mean, I mentioned this a little bit in my book that like, I talk about race in my comedy, but I don't talk about it in a general sense. I talk about it as it relates to my experiences. So I'm not the guy who's like, white people walk like this and black people walk like this. That's hacky comedy to me. But I am going to talk about what my experiences have been like, and then use that frame of reference to extrapolate a little bit. And I found that, and sometimes it doesn't have to explicitly be about race, but it can be about something that's adjacent to race and culture and can kind of pique people's interest. And I'll give you an example. This is a joke that I tell a lot. And I have a feeling like, even though I don't talk about these topics a lot, but I feel like this one joke has the potential to open somebody up and think about it in a new way. So one of the topics I talk about a lot is the language that we use, the terms that we use. And so I say this from the stage. I'm like, I get really irritated when I hear people use the phrase low-hanging fruit. You hear it in office settings a lot, like, oh, with this initiative, we need to go after the low-hanging fruit. And anytime I hear someone say that, I want to pause and ask them, hey, have you ever actually spent time picking low-hanging fruit? Because it's actually backbreaking labor. I think the expression you meant to say was, with this initiative, we need to go after the eye-level snacks in the Walgreens checkout line. Okay, now, that's a funny line. Like, yes. It's a funny thing to like point out Walgreens checkout. But in that, I have a bit where I have several jokes that are related to phrases, common phrases and terms. And I feel like the undercurrent of all of them is, let's be a little bit more empathetic in how we use our language and think about how it affects others. Yeah. Because, I guarantee you, most of the people who use that phrase, low-hanging fruit, don't actually spend time picking fruit because that's not their job. If they've done it, it was like a pleasure activity, like, oh, it's fall, let's go apple picking for an afternoon. It's not how they're actually making their living. Yep. And so in doing that joke, really what I'm doing is I'm inviting people to say, what if your life was like this?
Mm.
If your life was like this, would you be this casual about the language that you use? I'm not going to tell you the whole joke, but I have another joke about crack. And I say, like, I don't think people who might plausibly struggle with real crack addiction would be so cavalier and so casual in the way they compare things to crack. So I think that if you're good, you can do it in a way where you're not being accusatory, and you're not saying, "Oh, look at how wrong these people are who are always using these," but you're just drawing their attention to, "Isn't it interesting? Isn't that funny? It's funny how it's just funny how the people who use that phrase about low-hanging fruit don't actually pick low-hanging fruit." And if you really wanted to, you could then extrapolate. You could talk about income inequality. You could talk about, immigration and migration. You could talk about where our food comes from and what it means to source things locally. There's all kinds of things you could talk about that one joke touches on. But I'm not there to lead a TED Talk. I'm just there to give people a laugh and make them think a little differently.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's one of the great gifts that comedy brings, is it almost like turns the diamond a little bit. Like it just turns to kind of see it from another angle and another perspective. And without like the personal, you know what I mean? Like it like, oh, and because it's the surprise of the Walgreen kind of line, eye level candy. Like you sit there and go, oh my goodness, that's more what I mean.
Right.
And I haven't thought about this, gosh. And it just, there's like a level of empathy, but a little bit of like surprise. But then there's also this sense of like tension, because you're like, well, how many other lines do I not know where they came from, what they mean? But I just like I just say, and so like, that's like the power of this. Talk about the name Undercover Prophets. Like that's the title of the book. Yeah. Where did that come from? I always love like asking people, hey, how'd you get the title? Like where did that come from?
I think the title came from the idea that comics are usually the people who are willing to say the things that other people are afraid to say. And there is a social dimension to that like, people who are willing to be outrageous and say stuff. It's like there's a reason why most of us aren't willing to say it. It's because it's rude. Get your face punched in if you keep saying that stuff. But I also realized there's like this power dynamic level to it where sometimes you need someone who's willing to do that, because if that person is not there, that truth won't get spoken.
Yeah.
And I think about how the best stand-ups are able to articulate truths in an appealing way that can get their point across without necessarily endangering their life. And like I think about, this isn't a funny story, but in the Old Testament, in 1 Samuel, I think it is, when David is being confronted over the sin of taking Bathsheba as his wife, and it's Nathan, his friend, who goes and confronts him about it. And he doesn't just say like, David, you're wrong. He doesn't come out and say that at first. He tells him a story.
Yeah.
And so it's in telling the story that David is able to enter into the perspective of someone else who experiences the thing that he perpetrated upon them. And then he realizes, oh, that's wrong.
Yeah.
And David even says in the text, I think, like, oh, that person should be punished. And then Nathan is like, guess what? That guy is you. Now, again, that's not a funny story, but the same kind of skill that it takes to craft a narrative and to present a set of principles or ideas or to tell a story in a way that helps a person see their own life in a new way, that's an essential skill.
Yeah.
The reason why I call it Undercover Prophets is because the truth is, most of the time, the prophets that are really straightforward, they're either not taken seriously or they are taken seriously and they are persecuted. I mean, there's a reason why if you think about a lot of the Old Testament prophets, and a lot of them faced really dire times in their life where the kings were after them and they were being hunted, and they even wondered if God was still with them. Elijah and Elisha both had really intense times of maybe self-doubt and wondering, is God still with me on this? And so I felt like the idea of Undercover Prophets is learning how to do comedy will help you to tap into that vulnerable place where you talk about your own story. But if you do it right, you're not just being vulnerable just for the sake of being vulnerable, but you're being vulnerable in order to get at something really important that needs to be said.
Yeah.
And I believe very firmly that God has gifted each of us a series of experiences, a set of expertise, a set of cultural and intellectual lenses that are tied to our experiences, our geography, our education, our family history and heritage, and all of those things, our ethnic identities, and all of those things equip us to tell specific kinds of truths that only we can tell.
Yep.
And not that only we can talk about this topic, but like, I have a whole chapter on this in my book that, you need to learn to see yourself as worthy of your own story because you're the only person that can do it justice.
Yep.
And when you interrogate your own story and you come to realize, wow, like I have something worth sharing, then it should give you both the boldness and the vulnerability. The boldness to say, this is something that people need to hear, but the vulnerability to say, this is part of my story and I'm giving it to you in a real way. I'm not just saying, oh yeah, I used to struggle with that a long time ago or whatever, but it's like, no, let me tell you what happened to me last week, or let me tell you what I go through with my husband or with my kids, like all the time. And you're sharing this part of your life. And hopefully you're doing it in a humorous way, but you're doing it in a way that is very confessional. And I talk about this in the book, that stand-up is a very confessional form. When people get up there, and I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say this in open mics and informal comedy settings. People go, yeah, I do this because it's cheaper than therapy. And so it's like that people already have a felt need and a felt desire to share things. But what I hope to cover in this book, and what I want to see more Christians learn how to do, is to do it in a way that really connects with other people. That you're not just vomiting up your trauma just to put it out there and go, what do you do with that? But it's like, no, I'm sharing this in an invitational way that says, come with me in this journey. I have something good for you. And even if that good thing is just like what I said, like with the low hanging fruit thing, even if it's just a small nugget of like, I want you to think a little differently about that. But it's like, I'm allowing you to get into my mind a little bit, and I want to gift you with something that's going to make a difference in your life. That's what I want people to learn how to do.
Yeah. And I think it's so beautiful because one of the ways at which comedians, like when I study them, I can give you a list of names, people I've seen, but just the ones that I appreciate the most have this ability, like you said, that vulnerability, that confessional, but while they're doing it, they have this way of holding the tension. And so maybe the way that I describe it is, for some, they might see, either or, black or white, good or bad, whatever it is, right? And then all of a sudden, what comedy is able to do is they find like a little gap, and all of a sudden they start to expand that gap.
Yes.
And all of a sudden you're like, it's really, really gray. It's really, really gray. What's he gonna do? Please resolve this. Resolve this. Resolve. And it's like you now are like holding and bearing witness to the tension together.
Yeah.
And you don't know how or when or why or what will bring the resolution. And sometimes it comes and sometimes it doesn't. But somehow you're left like holding that you're like, oh my goodness. And it's like, it does something. And I realize there are pastors who know how to be vulnerable. And sometimes it's like a faux vulnerability, but they don't know how to hold tension.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then there's some people who know how to hold tension, but don't know how to be vulnerable. But I think like even just like seeing what you've written, there is this way at which I think in the art form to hold that, but know how to turn it, but know how to direct it towards the right energy, the right place, the right way, And I just, how do you think people, besides getting your book, because I think you lay out some really good stuff there. Say I pick up your book, and I think pastors, you should grab this book, read through it. But let's say I grab this book, I read through it. How do I put this stuff into practice? Like, what do you recommend?
Okay, so I feel like there's actually sort of two. You're kind of asking two questions at once.
Hey, I'm really good at doing the run-on multiple questions.
No, it's okay. It's okay. No, but this is what I mean by that is there's one because really it's kind of a two-part proposal sort of that I'm laying out in this book, which is on the one hand, I want you to use your comedy skills to be a better preacher. That's not primarily what the book is about, but I talk a little bit about how that will happen. Yep. But then the secondary thing is like, I want you to use your life experiences and your heart for people and your heart for Jesus and your openness to God to get on the comedy stage and connect with people. And those are I think two sets of ideas that work well together, but they're very distinct. So I'm going to talk about them separately. So when it comes to actually learning how to do comedy, I do say this in the book. Reading the book by itself will not help you to do comedy.
Yep.
Because comedy is a performance art. But I talk a lot about my own journey, and I give you a lot of specific tips and ways to think about it, such that if you decided you were going to do it and you want it and you dedicated time and energy in your life to do it, you can keep coming back to the book and being like, oh, this is what he was talking about. Oh, this is why he said to do da 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 da. So like I talk about, I actually encourage people to take a class. And because that's what I did. I took a class, and it was led by a stand-up guy, and it was in a space where they were mostly doing improv, but this was a stand-up class. And I'm actually at the point now where I'm hoping to actually start hosting classes online that are kind of a online in-person hybrid, where I would love if there is I'm being very clear. This is a shameless plug right now. If there are any pastors listening to this and you have 4 or 5 friends that are all in the same rough metro area, like within, 40 miles of each other, and you decide you want to do this and you want to learn as a group, then I would love to teach a class. And then at the end of that 8 weeks to fly into your city or town and like do an event together. Like I would love to do that. So that's the kind of the plug part of it. But I think the flip side of it, which is more towards what I think you're getting at, is how do we use our comedy skills to better inform our preaching and to better call people towards a more robust, more authentic faith. And obviously that could be a topic for a whole nother book, but I guess what I do want to say is that part of how you walk that out, a lot of stuff. It's a lot of what we talked about earlier about asking yourself, like, how does it think, and playing it out. But it's also kind of about asking the question, what do I want to leave people with? What is like? I mean, I know this is a really basic thing, and frankly, a lot of pastors should already know this. But just in case, it's like, what is the thing that I want you to take away from this? And then craft it in a way that after you brought them through that tension, that tense-filled moment, that you lead them to a place of grace and safety and love and acceptance. And not to say like everything's okay, right? Because we still live in the real world. But be intentional about using that emotional state that you help to create through your comedy for the purpose of leading them to a good place.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example. This is an example I talk about a little bit in the book, but I'm gonna flesh it a little bit more. So, and this, getting back to what you asked me earlier, why Undercover Prophets? To be honest, I think this story was probably in the back of my mind when I picked that title, because it came out later, and I'll tell you what I mean. So, but first, let me ask you this: have you ever heard of Ezekiel 4:9 bread?
I have. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Have you had it?
I have. Yeah.
Okay. I have too.
My friend's parents, that's all they ate. So I like over there. Peanut butter was very difficult sandwich.
Yeah. So, I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, a very, very crunchy, organic part of the country. And so I would see it too. And I've had the Ezekiel 4:9 bread and I'm like, that's cool. But for a while I was kind of like, I mean, it's a little odd when you're in the middle of like Winco or whatever, and you're like, it's a bread that has a Bible verse on it. Like I can't think of any other consumer products that are like food, especially that have like Bible verses on them. That's not in like some Christian bookstore, but just like in the general market. So it made me wonder, like, what's up with that? Why is it called that? What is Ezekiel 4:9? So I looked up Ezekiel 4:9, and it basically is instructions on how to bake this bread. Matter of fact, if you look at the package, it kind of quotes that. It's like, bake this bread using these kind of ingredients, da 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 da. But if you keep reading, you find out something else really important. And so I'm actually just going to take a minute and I'm going to pull this up and I'm going to read it to you right now. Because when I read the rest of this passage, I just felt like my mind was totally blown. And then you'll understand the point that I'm making. So
the stock on Ezekiel 4:9 is about to just tank. Because of Jelani's hard-hitting journalism.
It might take, or it might spike, because you might find people going, I need to get some of this bread just so I can make this illustration. Okay? So Ezekiel 4, verse 9, it says this: take wheat and barley, beans and lentils, millet and spelt. I'm reading from the NIV. And use them to make bread for yourself. You are to eat it during the 390 days you lie on your side. Now I'm going to ignore that part. That's really weird. Like, wow, 390 days to lie on your side. I only have a couple weeks of vacation time. I can't imagine doing that for 390 days. We're going to set that aside for a moment. I'm just going to say that part of being a prophet is like, God calls you to do some weird stuff. And it's like, not weird stuff just for its own sake or for freaking people out, but it's like weird stuff in order to make a point. So God's trying to make a point with this. All right. So I'm going to keep going. So, sorry, I feel like I'm preaching now, but it's too late.
I love it. Let's go.
All right. So verse 10, weigh out 20 shekels of food to eat each day, eat it at set times. Skip forward 11 and 12. Okay, I'll get to 12. So 12 says this, Ezekiel 4, verse 12, eat the food as you would a loaf of barley bread, bake it in the sight of the people using human excrement for fuel. I read that for the first time and I went, wait, what? And then it says, he keeps going. The Lord says, in this way, the people of Israel will eat defiled food among the nations where I will drive them. And then this is Ezekiel responding now. Verse 14. Then I said, not so, sovereign Lord. I've never defiled myself. From my youth until now, I've never eaten anything found dead or torn by wild animals. No impure meat has ever entered my mouth. Very well, he said. This is the Lord responding. I will let you break your bread over cow dung instead of human excrement. Like, that's hilarious. That, like, if that would have happened in a sitcom and it's like God and Ezekiel, God would say that, oh, just do it over cow's dung instead. And he would leave the room and Ezekiel would be staring and shouting out to an empty room, that's not any better. What? No. Why did I tell that whole story? Well, why is it in the Bible? It's in the Bible because God is trying to use Ezekiel to communicate to the people that he finds their behavior detestable, that he is disgusted with them. And so he is asking Ezekiel to do something that will intentionally provoke their like gag reflexes so that they will understand that the Lord is like, this is how I feel about how you've been towards me. And the thing about it is, when I realized this, I thought to myself, who read this whole story and then decided, I want to sell this bread? Now, here's the thing. Getting back to your question of what do I want to leave people with? When I tell that story on stage, I don't want the punchline to be, these people who are selling bread are stupid. And that's not what I want people to get, because I don't think they're stupid. They probably do know the story, and they're probably like, yeah, but it's actually good for you if you do it right and, don't use cow dung and like whatever. So, but my point is, what I want to lead people when I tell that story is, this is why you need to learn to read the word of God for yourself and not get it secondhand.
That's good.
Because God has something good for you that's relevant. It's relevant to your life. But if you only just take the little bit that you hear from someone else, then you've missed so much. Yeah. It's just like reading that one verse and saying, well, that's boring. It's a verse about bread. Well, that doesn't mean anything, And so that, to me, getting back to the question of how do we make an impact in people, I want to tell that story in a way that lets people know the Bible is relevant, that God's word is good. There is stuff in there that will help you, that will not just help you, not just like in a like, ooh, you should do this, take your medicine kind of way, but like there's stuff in there that's captivating and funny and amazing and compelling. And like, I don't want you to miss it. It's like in the same way that people this time of year, the Oscars were just last night. In the same way people are like, oh, have you seen this movie? Oh, it's so good. You got to see it. It's like, have you read this part of the word of God? Like, it's so good. I want you to get it for yourself. Yeah. And so that is when you're intentional about what you give people, then you can give them something good and say, this is for you, right? It's not just for everybody else. It's not just for the super cool Christian people or the sinner, quote unquote sinners. Like, it's for you, whoever you are, it's for you. And so that, I think, having that intentionality is how we bless people.
Well, it's so amazing too, because again, what you did right there, just bringing it full circle with how you unpack all of this in Undercover Prophet, but like the thought where you have this prop that's this piece of bread. And have you ever read Ezekiel 4:9? And it like, like you have this sense of like, oh, that's ingredients. Well, yeah, totally, But then you're like, but the way that you said, have you ever read Ezekiel 4? Like I'm listening to going, wait, there's more right there. You know what I mean? And it's like, I need resolution. And you just let it, you didn't give it away, but you let it linger and then you turned it. You know what I mean? And that's like, that's where I think, man, when we can do that in a way, in a world where people are feeling like phantom vibrates, like from their phone, they think they've gotten a text during a sermon. It just keeps them a little bit more focused. It keeps them a little bit more to go, oh my goodness, like, wow. And so I just love, man, Jelani, what you're about, what you're doing. Where can people find you?
I'm not as often on the socials as I was, frankly, because I'm trying to cut back, but I am on Facebook. I have a personal Facebook account and a Facebook page. So you can search for me, Jelani Greenidge, find either one of those. You can find me on Instagram. I'm Jelani G Natural. G Natural is one of my stage names when I do hip hop. So Jelani G Natural on Instagram. And also just I do a lot of writing for the ECC and also a lot of freelance writing. So just if you search for my name, you'll find some stuff that's out there that I've done, and hopefully we can connect and link up.
Awesome. Well, friends, reach out to Jelani, pick up his book, Undercover Prophets. When Jelani mentions the ECC, that's the Evangelical Covenant Church. He does a ton there as a missional storyteller. But friends, thanks so much. And I will give you this challenge. Like, think of one kind of aspect that you heard from Jelani. Maybe it's in the sense of taking a class. Maybe it's picking up the book. Maybe it is, gathering a few of your friends who, you guys love to laugh. And maybe there's some kind of course you need to do by reaching out to Jelani. Maybe it's just in this weekend's sermon coming up. You're like, all right, I need to look over my notes and is there a way to maybe feel that text just a little bit to create that kind of Ezekiel 4:9 opportunity for people to see that there's more. But don't just hear this podcast. Try to put something into practice. And I promise you, comedy takes time. Storytelling takes time. But the more that you put into it, man, the more people will lean in and hopefully be able to gather more and gain more from the text and from your preaching. But my friends, if there's ever any ways I can serve you, don't hesitate to reach out at stevecarter.org or you can email me, steve@steveryancarter.com. Much love, everyone. Until next time, grace and peace.